We're going to move now to our next case study from Asia before we then move to Africa. So Deepak Khadka is from IDE, and speaking about Bangladesh is next. Deepak, are you with us?
I am with you, Kate.
Wonderful.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted and honored to be here. For my presentation today, I am representing 4 partners who have come together to design, finance, and implement the Sandmark initiative. Sandmark is short for sanitation marketing. And this program is a collaboration between the government of Bangladesh, the Embassy of Switzerland in Bangladesh, UNICEF, and IDE, along with many important private sector partners. And I'm really delighted and honored to be presenting this on behalf of them. My presentation today, Kate, will focus on sharing our lessons on 2 broad themes. The first one is on how WASH solutions can be both affordable and scalable if we put emphasis on using market-based approaches as opposed to relying solely on development assistance, which becomes an important agenda around the financing gap to meet the SDG goal that you talked about earlier. And the second theme, in line with what the keynote from Brian was, is on the lessons in designing climate adaptive sanitation solutions that are resilient and robust so that investments made in improving access to water and sanitation can be safeguarded in climate vulnerable region. So thank you. Just keep on this slide for a second. This slide gives a quick context on the situation of Bangladesh right now. The most recent data shows that Bangladesh has made remarkable progress in terms of addressing open defecation. And thanks to the efforts from many different sectors and investments made by both the government and development partners. But of course, access to improved sanitation or improved latrines remains, open defecation, just by addressing it, you still don't have the access to improved sanitation, with almost half of the country still using some form of unimproved solution. And you can see an example of a very basic and quite degraded latrine in this picture, which are unfortunately more the norms rather than the exceptions. Next slide, please. It was against this backdrop that the Sandmark program was conceptualized between the partners, with major design inputs from to IDE from the Embassy of Switzerland and UNICEF, and launched in 2015. The Sandmark model is quite simple. The goal was to find the right balance between an affordable technology and that the technology had to be delivered through a context-specific business model to reach the last mile. In this photo, you'll see 2 latrine business entrepreneurs that market, sell, install, and provide maintenance services to their consumers. And you'll also see a blue pan called a Sato pan, designed by Lixil, which is the core technology to make this latrine safe and hygienic. We have reached over 1.5 million people who have bought these improved latrines, and through more than 2,000 sanitation entrepreneurs like those 2 gentlemen you see there. And we plan to reach nearly 5 million people by the time this project ends, resulting in a self-sustaining market. Next slide, please. However, in late May 2021, the coastal belt of southwestern Bangladesh and parts of the northeast India was hit by Cyclone Yas. More than 1.3 million people were affected in Bangladesh alone. 26,000 houses and over 16,000 latrines were destroyed or damaged. And this picture is from Satkhira district in Bangladesh, where over 200,000 families were affected. And you can see the damage to the infrastructure there in the picture. And just to put things in perspective, this was the same time when COVID pandemic had been going on for almost a year and had severely depleted the resilience and coping capacity of these communities. And with the most recent predictions, of course, events like these are likely to be more frequent and more severe. Next slide, please. So in November, IDE conducted a detailed analysis of the situation using a framework called the Climate, Environment, and Disaster Risk Reduction Integration Guidance. In short, it's called Cedric. Sorry, it's a mouthful. It's a tool developed by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, that seeks to systematically integrate climate, environment, and DRR into development programs like these, and to enhance the overall resilience of systems and communities. So needless to say, the results were quite obvious. On one hand, we had made quite an interesting progress in changing sanitation behaviors and encouraging low-income households to invest their hard-earned money in latrines. And on the other hand, they were seeing their investments literally wash away. So during this Cedric analysis, communities after communities were saying the same thing to us. Why invest in latrines if we cannot safeguard it? Next slide, please. And without the ability for these communities or the lack of confidence for them to invest in new technologies and safeguard them, they were obviously reverting to unimproved solution like this one, and we definitely don't want them to be doing this. And for us, the question was, if we don't find answers for these communities, we could see years of investments from the government, from development partners, and most importantly, from the communities themselves being wasted. Next slide, please. And the impact of the cyclone was not only felt by the communities, but perhaps even more so by the local entrepreneurs within the market ecosystem. There were many conversations like the one that this gentleman is talking about, who most of them were, really just barely recovering from the business loss due to COVID, and then they had a compounded impact by the cyclone. Next slide, please. So if you go to the next slide, thank you, perfect. So at IE, we understand technology and business. This is what we do. So it was back to the drawing board for us. We had to understand how these specific weather conditions affect existing infrastructure and how what low-cost adaptation could look like. There were many iterations to our design, but we finally ended up with some interesting features that we found to work. Could you go back one slide? This included designing the shape to reduce wind forces, so it's round in its shape, introducing new materials to increase durability, and adding a raised platform to address flooding. And at the same time, of course, we wanted this to be affordable. Next slide, please. So the next step was to adapt the market ecosystem. One slide back, please. We wanted to adapt the market ecosystem. Perfect. The question was, could these new designs of latrine be built and scaled by the entrepreneurs themselves? And of course, the simple answer was yes, they could. Very quickly, we realized how adaptive these entrepreneurs were and how innovative they could be in the use of materials and designs. Next slide, please. The preliminary results for us have been good. These new solutions are still affordable. They are still available through the same market channels. And in some cases, these designs have been through some heavy storms, though a major cyclone has not come through yet. And fingers crossed, of course, that it won't. But the main takeaway for us is that there is an increased capacity of the system, which includes the communities, the entrepreneurs, and the supply chain around them to respond to changes and to adapt. And this is important because building the resilience capacity of a system means that the system actors also become more resilient. Next slide, please. And finally, just as a reminder, we get excited about the technology, but most often when we talk about solutions, it's not just about the technology, it is about the consumers. It is about their desires, about their behavior, their affordability. And we're now working on ways to reduce the cost of product and production by exploring alternate materials to keep the prices low. It is also about the market ecosystem and their capacity to continue to adapt and respond to the impacts of climate change. And for us, most importantly, it is about creating real partnerships based on mutual respect and support, such as this one here with Sandmark initiative between the government of Bangladesh, the Embassy of Switzerland, UNICEF, and of course, IDE facilitating these networks and engagements to scale these models. So I'm going to stop here, Kate. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Back over to you.